Hello my fair friends, I'm Ruby Ruse, this is Baby Bunny, and welcome to Fairy Fortunes. Today we are continuing our ABCs of Mythology series with W is for Wild Hunt. Now, if you are watching this video in December of 2019, you may notice that the series does skip from the letter I to the letter W. I do plan to go back and fill in the rest of the series, and we'll have them in order of the alphabet. But I wanted to release this video for Yule. Not only are we going to be talking about the mythology of the Wild Hunt today, I am also going to share with you an idea for a Wild Hunt ritual that you can do yourself to celebrate Yule this year. I will have a timestamp listed for you in the description box so that you can skip ahead to the ritual if you so desire. Now, the Wild Hunt features heavily in Scandinavian mythology, and it is incredibly associated with the god Odin. The Scandinavian pantheon really doesn't have a one specific role that they do. Most of the gods have multiple functions that they perform, and they have overlapping functions that they perform. So in addition to being a life bringer, Odin is also associated with ancestral pursuits and is considered another god of the dead. He is also a god associated with the hunt, with traveling and magic, wandering, language even. So Odin has a lot of interests and occupations and things that you can take to him and work with him. One of the things that Odin is very much associated with in Scandinavian mythology is this concept of the Wild Hunt. Now, in the Wild Hunt, there's a lot of speculation as to when the Wild Hunt occurs. Some stories have it happening more towards the Halloween, end of October, early November. Some of the stories push it far back into midwinter during the months of February, and some stories associated with specifically with Yule. So, and that's a very prominent theme, is the Yule theme. And the idea is that Odin would gather up his sons and his brothers and his good friends, and he would have a huge entourage of the warriors that he had taken into Valhalla, and he would have this wild hunt, this huge hunting party that would rage across the lands during one of these time periods. And this wild procession was like a tidal wave, and if you got caught up in this, if you got caught up in this procession that was rushing through the countryside, is that you might be swept up by the procession and be dropped off miles away from where you intended to go. So it was very, and this actually the theme of being caught in the Wild Hunt and being transported or swept up or even kidnapped by the Wild Hunt is a reoccurring theme that we'll see in different traditions of this concept, because more than one society had this idea of the Wild Hunt. So it was dangerous to be caught within the Wild Hunt, because if you were swept up by this rushing tidal wave of Odin and his brothers and his sons and all of these people with their gigantic divine horses, Sleipnir having the 8 legs that he does, is that you could be swept up like a tidal wave and thrown far, far away from your destination. So traveling during these months, as we're moving away from autumn and into the winter months, is that it was dangerous to be out traveling during this time, because you did not want to be caught in Odin's Wild Hunt. Now there is some speculation, because remember too that Odin is a god associated with magic as well as hunting, as well as the life and death and these kinds of things, is that there is some speculation that the mystics in the Viking tribes would actually join the hunt voluntarily. And how they would do that is they would go into a trance. Seed trancing was most predominantly done by women. So it is interesting to me that perhaps the volunteers going on Odin's wild hunt were not men, they were probably women. So that's an interesting thing to note. But these mystics would voluntarily go into kind of a trance or dream state. They would practice the seed magic, and they would join this hunt, and they would have these experiences and come back with a learned experience or some information for the tribe, or just a personal gnosis for themselves. So in addition to, like I said, Odin had his sons with him, he also would take his brothers and people from Valhalla. So the honored dead would be a part of this procession. And it could be that this idea is what fueled that idea that in these midwinter months when this wild hunt was taking place, that this was fed into that idea that the veil between the worlds of the living and the dead were very thin at this time. And that was another danger, is that another danger of being swept away by the wild hunt is maybe you would be swept away by this tidal wave and wind up far, far away from where you plan to go, or maybe you would not come back at all. And if you think of a tidal wave, if you think of a tsunami or a tornado or some of these natural forces that happen in the world, is sometimes people survive, but a great deal of the time they don't. And so that was another concept, is that if you were swept away by this wild hunt, if you were caught outdoors and were in their path during the Odin's wild hunt, is that it was possible that you would join the procession of that honored dead and you would never come back to the living, rather. So, as I mentioned, the wild hunt is often associated with Yule, and there are many ideas that the mythology that we have surrounding the modern version of Santa Claus is directly correlated to the wandering aspect of Odin and this idea of this wild hunt. And there are many points of evidence to suggest that he is one of the sources for Santa Claus. One of the things that ancients of the Viking civilizations would do is that there is some tales that during this time of the wild hunt, when you were safe indoors, is that the children or other people would leave gifts for members of the hunt and also for the divine hunters, the divine horses, one of them being the eight-legged steed Sleipnir. And so people would leave out treats for the hunters and for Sleipnir the horse. And so if you left out a gift for Sleipnir, is that Odin would reward you and give you a present, a gift, to show his appreciation for doing that. So there was this idea, and so that to me is very akin to leaving cookies out that Western people do now, is that we leave cookies out for Santa Claus. And so it ties back to this much older practice of leaving out sustenance for the members of the wild hunting party. I also think it's really interesting that Santa Claus, his mythology concerns 8 reindeer. Now, okay, in more modern times, if you were born in the 1960s or later, then you would know of the 9 reindeer rather than 8. But originally there were 8 reindeer of Santa Claus. And I find it very interesting that Odin's divine steed has 8 legs. So I just think that that's a very interesting coincidence that happens. Odin is very much a part of this wild hunt concept. So, and it was, like I said, they would go on this raging hunt, and it was just supposed to be just cathartic and wild and rushing. And like I said, it had this imagery of it, of a natural disaster, a tsunami, a tidal wave, a tornado, hurricane, these kinds of things. And this is also reflected in many other mythological tales of the Wild Hunt, because it wasn't just the Vikings that had this concept. We find this concept of the Wild Hunt featured in many different stories. It featured heavily also in Western cultures, the British Isles, Wales, Scotland, Ireland, these places. So there, as I said, there are many instances of seeing this idea of this wild hunt. And I think where this comes from is that midwinter is, of course, it was rather a very dangerous time for people of the ancient world. You know, you had to be very careful that you had a heat source. You had to be careful that you had enough food to get you through the winter. So there was this very real possibility that you would not make it through midwinter. And definitely this wild hunt concept kind of plays into that idea, is that mythology was very much a way for people to explain the unexplainable. And so how do you explain the harshness of winter? How do you explain the loss and of your companions, of people that you love and are fond of? Is a beautiful story to say, oh, they were taken by Odin's wild hunt. Oh, they went off with the god Hern. And so part of this, and then like I said, the wild hunt really had this energy of natural disaster behind it, where it was both terrible and frightening but beautiful at the same time, is that these amazing forces of nature. So the wild hunt really is a way to explain those horrific yet beautiful forces that are beyond explanation sometimes, but are a part of our natural world. So another wild hunt that I want to talk about is, of course, directly related to the Fae, because as I said when I started this mythology project, is that I really wanted to bring to you mythology that had something to do with the Fae. There is another group of beings that I do want to talk about that comes to us from Celtic mythology, and they are the Sluagh. Now, the Sluagh were a particularly, well, I should say are, the Sluagh are a particularly dangerous Fae. Now, if you've been watching my channel for some time, you will realize that I've said this many times before, that the Fae are not necessarily friendly. Even the beautiful ones can be exceptionally dangerous. You have to appreciate that the Fae, we do not have a word for good or evil in our own languages, because that concept does not exist in our culture. Because there is always good in the bad, and there is always bad in the good. So always treat the Fae with the utmost respect, and understand that they are very dangerous beings. Even the benevolent ones can be exceptionally dangerous. So the Sluagh are definitely more dangerous than others, because it is very rare for them to be benevolent to human beings, so just be cautious. They are described as having a bird-like appearance, specifically the raven. It's often said that they appear as a flock of ravens, so if you are looking at what you think is a flock of ravens in the distance, be very watchful and careful, because it actually may be a group of Sluagh. and they have their own wild hunt. So they are said to have beaks for mouths, and they have very leathery wings that wrap around them like a cloak. So if you see them from behind, they will look like a person wearing a leather cloak. But once you see their faces, it's very difficult for these beings to take on a more human look. So if you see them from behind, they can pass as human, but once you get and see their face, they cannot. So they have supposed to have beaks for mouths. And what I found interesting is that they actually sound quite similar to a phenomenon called, in modern American culture, are called Mothmen. I do think that Mothmen could be a form of Sluagh. So stay tuned. I may have another video on that concept in the future. So please subscribe and like so that you can be notified of that future video. So the Sluagh were said actually to steal the souls of the living. So as I said, with Odin, you could be swept away by his procession, and there was a possibility that you could survive it, although you might not. With the Sluagh, their wild hunt was very much for the sole purpose of collecting human souls. What they did with those souls was not clear. People were very cautious in the winter months in the Celtic lands because they were very cautious about the Sluagh. Because if you were failing, if you were sick and weakly, it was very likely that the Sluagh, in the course of their wild hunt, would come for your soul. Which, once again, like I said, mythology is a way to explain the unexplainable. It is to give meaning to experiences. And so when all of these people would die during the winter months, this was a way to give meaning to that death, is that perhaps they were taken by the Sluagh. Now, it is also said that you can call the Sluagh to you. And one of the ways is actually by saying their name. Hold on, bunny. Hold on, they might be coming. Because we've said it several times. So be very careful when you say the names of these beings, because words do have power. So that was one way that you could call them to you. But another way to call them was with this sense of hopelessness. So the idea that you really can die of a broken heart, because that sense of hopelessness can draw out the Sluagh and make them interested in your soul. So now that was a bit of a problem. So if you are struggling through the winter months, and you are seeing omens of ravens following you around, and you believe that you have attracted the attention of the Sluagh, what do you do? The only way to escape them was to sacrifice another in your place. So you would literally have to give them another human being to take in your place. When we go through winter now, in the modern times that we are, here in 2019 is when this video is being made, we don't have those same concerns that our ancestors did. Most of us, although there is still poverty even in the developed world, most people though, we have access to heat sources. We have access to food. So most people now are not succumbing to exposure and to the elements of the harsh winter realities. However, what's interesting is that this also tends to be a time of darkness. It can be a time of hopelessness. So many people struggle through the winter months because of this time of darkness, or maybe it goes beyond these scientific explanations of what's happening. Maybe this just is a time to sit with that sorrow, to sit with that sense of darkness. Now, as I said, sadness is not the enemy. Sadness is not a negative emotion. It is simply an emotion. However, it is very easy to lose oneself in the sadness. So when it's one thing to be sad, it's quite another thing to be hopeless. And remember, it is that hopelessness that is what attracts the sluagh to you. So, and there is a lot of stress during the winter months because we do have several holidays during this time of year. The holidays can bring us together with family and friends, and it is meant to be festive. It is meant to pull us out of any kind of dark, hopeless thoughts that we're experiencing because the world itself is dark during this time. But also being around that festivity, being around family members actually can trigger some old wounds and trigger some thoughts of things are never going to change. I'm always going to be this way. I haven't learned anything. And that hopelessness can actually be aggravated by this festive experience. So that is what I would like to address with this idea that I came up for a modern Yule ritual for you to perform. I would suggest that you have a 2-day process, because the first day we're going to be making some effigies. Remember, the only way to get the sluagh off of your scent is to provide them with a sacrifice, to give them someone else. Now, when we have learned that we no longer need to actually sacrifice the person, okay? No, we don't need to kill rabbits, okay? Or people. No killing. Don't do that. There is a better way to do that. So we're going to, the first day of the process is that you are going to make your sacrifice. You are going to make your effigy to remove the sluagh from you. So this ritual is to cleanse you of that sense of hopelessness. That is what is attracting or could attract the sluagh to you. So we are going to make little effigies. So the day one is the effigies. So I have with me here today some burlap strips. However, you can make this effigy out of corn husks. And in fact, what the pattern that I'm using is actually from a corn husk doll pattern. So I would recommend the corn husks because we are going to be leaving these effigies out in the elements. So it would be great if you use corn husks because they are biodegradable. However, burlap is also biodegradable, so if you wanted to use burlap like I'm doing today, you could in fact do that. So day one is going to be making the effigy. So here is what we're going to do with that. So with your corn husks, you're going to take, or your burlap, you're going to take 4 strips together like this. And you're just going to bundle them up just like this. And you're going to try to make the ends as even as possible here. Now today, just for speed factors, I am going to be using elastic bands. These, however, are not biodegradable, so you're going to want to use maybe some twine from the burlap itself if you're choosing to use burlap, or some kind of cotton fiber to tie your doll with so that they will be completely biodegradable. But just for speed factor today, I'm just going to use elastic bands. So the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to do your first tie. Like I said, you remember you lined up those strips as close as you could to get them as even as you can. If they are not perfectly even, you can always trim them with a pair of scissors. So you're just gonna, my elastic band is right here, about 1.5 inches from the top. It's rough, people. You don't have to be perfect here. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna actually flip the strips to the other side. Do you see that there? So now the rubber band is inside, and I've joined up so that we do not have those rough edges sticking out. And then you're going to take another tie and tie so that you have a nice round head at the top, like that. You see that? Alrighty. So next, if you're using burlap, you're probably going to want to use 2 strips of burlap here. But if you're using a corn husk, you probably only need to use 1. So you're going to line these 2 up. I'm going to fold them together and kind of twist them up like this. And then you're going to tie off the two ends like this. Then you're going to take your effigy here, and you're going to take and put this in between. Remember, you had 4 together. So you make it so that you have 2 in front and 2 in back, like that. And then these now become your arms, like this. You see that? So just below, once you get your arms in place, we're going to tie it again in the middle to create kind of a torso. And there's that. You see that? But he's a little stumpy. See that? There's a little stumpy. So next what we're going to do is we're going to take... Now my strips are a little long, so I'm going to actually fold my strips in half here. So once again, I'm going to put 2 in the front, like this, 2 in the front. Actually, at this point, the front and the back are either or right now. And 2 in the back, like this. See that? And then now we're going to need another tie in the same place that we put that last tie. If you wanted this to be, if you wanted this character to have a skirt, you could stop at this point. Just rearrange those corn husks or your burlap like this. Just arrange it until you like the look of the skirt here. So this, you could stop at this point if you wanted to. But if you would like them to have legs, this is the next step. So we're going to take another strip or another corn silk, and we're going to wrap it across the body like this. Do you see that? So I'm going, so this is my right side, so this is going to go over the doll's right shoulder, and then we'll come to the left side of their torso. There's the arm. And you're going to hold that there, and then you're going to do the same on the opposite side. So the left shoulder to the right side of the body and under the arm. You see how it goes under the arm there? And like I said, these, it does not have to be precise. It does not have to be precise. So once you get those crosses in place, you're going to take another tie, and you're going to tie it around the waist for a 3rd time. Now, if you do choose to use the corn husks, a lot of times as I said, the doll will stand, and actually it might stand by itself. Like I said, if you did not want to make legs, you don't have to. You can leave it as a skirt. So they sometimes will, with the corn husks, they will be able to stand. Oh, look, he's standing. Look, Bunny, he's standing. Can you see that? Let's see if I can put it in my hand. Yep, I can. So I can raise it up. So it will stand on its own if you want to leave it on a skirt. So, but to make the legs is very, very simple. So all we're going to do is we're going to take these legs and we're going to just split it. Instead of having a skirt function, we're just going to wrap the legs together, all of those burlaps that we did before. And we're just going to, just like we did with the arms, we're just going to make little feet about 1/2 inch away from the bottom strips there. And then you just repeat that on the next side. Now, if you do make legs, if you want to stand them up, they won't really stand without a support. If you leave them with the skirt, they do stand on their own, but it will be very difficult for him to stand. It might work, it works just a little bit. He has to kind of do a little bit of a split in order to stand. The burlap, the corn husks, I will let you know, do balance a little bit better. So there is your effigy. So, but there is more to do than this, because we're now going to take this effigy that's going to be your sacrifice to remove the hopelessness from you, to have the Sluagh take this instead of your soul. That sounds so dark. Woo! There is a warning on this video. So remember that this is to combat that sense of hopelessness. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take the hopelessness that we have and we're going to put it in this effigy, because the idea is that, remember that the Sluagh are attracted to hopelessness. So we want to take our feelings and dump them all into this effigy. So with this, the burlap and the corn husks will take ink and paint very, very well. I'm going to be using a Sharpie marker today, but to do this next step, if you do want to make it biodegradable, and remember that there are probably going to be animals out there that will find that may chew on your corn husk doll. So you may want to use some non-toxic options. So make sure that if you are planning to leave this outside, as you should, because that's the name of the game here, is that you will want to use a non-toxic type of paint to do this next step. So here is why this is a two-part process. So once you're finished with this effigy, you're going to want to fill it with your hopelessness. So here are the things that you need to consider when you are making this effigy. Think about what are some of the worst things that happened to you during this year. For me, in my NaNoWriMo video, I talked about that I had a very difficult final week. The third week of November was a very, very difficult week for me. I experienced a very great sense of loss during that week. And so I would say that that was probably the worst thing that happened to me, was that powerful sense of loss. So I want to put that loss, that loss that was so deep and horrible that it almost made me lose my way. That made me feel like I was drowning, not sitting with sadness, but drowning in it. So I want to take that drowning feeling and put it inside this effigy. So we're going to make a sigil for that loss, or rather that's my experience, that terrible loss that I had. So the best, now a simple sigil is, the word that I keep repeating is loss. So a simple sigil is I can take the letter L and I can write a letter L on my effigy here. Now that in and of itself is a perfectly fine sigil to use. But if you want to make it more magical, more ethereal, you can just, a simple sigil is just taking the shape of the letter and just playing with it and making it something artistic. Now, if you use runes, or if you are also a practitioner of geomancy, you can also use symbols from a divination system that have meaning to you, pretty much, or just doodling on this image to represent the concepts that you're trying to put into this alternative thing for the Sluagh to take instead of you. That's what we're trying to accomplish here. So it's all about making it meaningful to you. So here I have drawn on my effigy's chest, I have drawn an L that I've just made a little more artistic. And for me, this now is a symbol for the loss that I felt. That terrible, the worst thing that happened to me this year. So the next thing that I want you to consider and put into this effigy is, what are some of the painful things that you just feel you can't forget from this year? I think one of the most painful things that happened to me this year that I really feel I cannot forget is that I had someone attack my sense of self. They actually use their own religion as a weapon against mine. And I came away feeling so horrible from that. Although the lesson that I learned from that is that I never want anyone else to feel what I felt on that day. I never wanted anyone else to feel attacked. But I certainly felt attacked, and I will never forget that as long as I live. So that was something that happened this year for me. Something that was a painful thing that I do not think I will ever forget, is that being attacked. And someone using their own religion as a weapon against me. So I think what I'm going to do for that, because they were using it as a weapon, most people are right-handed, so I'm going to put that symbol, I'm going to put a symbol for that on my effigy's right hand. So the word that I used was attacked, so I'm going to make, I'm going to draw a letter, I was going to go with a symbol of the letter A, but actually I started drawing a point to make the letter A, but see, it looks like a blade, so I'm not going to finish the A. That is going to represent being attacked this year, something that I cannot forget. The next thing that I want you to consider with this effigy is what scars or stains have been left upon you from this year's trials. So I talked about this sense of loss that I felt, and I talked about this being attacked. And what scars did that leave on me? Now, I drew the loss over my heart, and I really felt like my heart got hurt this year. And I through the weapon on their right hand. But I think those two instances really marked me in my head, that it was not about being physically attacked for me, it was this mental onslaught for me. And I actually have several scars that I've gotten from physical trials and tribulations in my own life. So I'm actually going to draw those scars on my little effigy here, to kind of give a physical representation of those challenges that I face. So I actually have a scar over my eyebrow here. And many of you might have noticed this scar here underneath my nose, so I'm going to draw that on my effigy. I also at one point had a scar here, but it's very faded now, so I'm going to draw that on my cheek. I have a terrible scar on my leg. And actually, as I think about the scar in my leg, I'm going to share with you something that has marked me. In addition to Fairy Fortunes, I'm sure you're shocked that I have another occupation. I really don't want to go into that other occupation, but I feel that that is something that I have to see through for at least another 5 years. But it has been a very deep source of grief for me, this loss that I'm talking about here, that painful thing. And in addition to that, also being attacked actually came from this other job. And so this job has really been kind of a source of pain. Definitely has left not just physical scars, but it has left emotional scars as well. And one of them that's actually bothering me a lot lately is one on my leg that I received actually from the occupation that I'm in, and like I said, I'm committed to for the next 5 years. I am not going to leave this job, although maybe I should. That's a given. I'm still not going to leave it for another 5 years, but there you go. But I'm definitely going to mark this particular scar, because this scar truly represents that deep emotional wound that this occupation does bring to me, and does actually add a lot of that drowning sadness, that hopelessness to me. And so I'm actually going to make an even bigger X, which is kind of taking on the shape of the rune Now These, which is a rune that means need, but it's often associated with more darker concepts, need that is not being met, if you will. So I think it's very interesting that I chose to make this very prominent and chose kind of a Now These looking symbol for this. So that's going to be representing what scars and stains have been left upon you from this year's trials. So now I have one more question for you to consider and to put into this effigy sacrifice that you're making. What oppressive beliefs might you be carrying forward into the new year from these experiences? So the way I want you to think about this particular question is if you do not do this ritual, because the idea is that we're going to do this ritual and the idea is to hopefully not carry these scars and stains and hopelessness and painful memories. Hopefully we are not going to allow this to affect us in the 2020. That's part of this ritual, is to help us work through those issues. But if you didn't do this ritual, or what this ritual is to address, what are those oppressive beliefs that you have now that you want to leave behind? put it in here. Put those oppressive beliefs here. So what are some oppressive beliefs for me? Well, I talked about, the one that comes to mind is the now-thies on the left leg here of my effigy. The oppressive belief is that I am nothing without this occupation. That I can't leave it, because if I leave it, then I'm nothing without that. That I will starve, that I will lose my house, that I will lose everything if I leave behind this job. So that's an oppressive thought that I have. So I have to take these attacks. I have to suffer this loss because I'm nothing without this occupation. So that's an example of an oppressive belief that I might be carrying forward. So I don't want to carry that belief. I am more than that. I am not nothing. I am certainly something. And obviously, that is not all. My job, that occupation, is not all that I am. So put that oppressive belief, put it here. So, and you don't have to draw symbols. You could even write messages on this doll. You can write whole paragraphs if you want to. You could even, before you make this doll, you could write things on those corn husks before you even build the doll. So that's an idea for you to consider too. So that oppressive belief that I am nothing without this occupation. And the idea is that I don't want to turn it into a positive. We want the hopelessness to be in this doll. So usually when I do spell work, you want to make it more, you want to make it like you're going to something and not running away from something. So for example, running away from something is, I'm nothing without this job. That's stagnant. That's going nowhere. Whereas if I was creating a empowerment spell, I would say, I am more than my job. Do you understand the difference now? So, like I said, there is no positive or negative, really. But in spell work, it's a little bit better if you are going towards something rather than shutting down something. So just be careful in your spell work about that. If you would like me to do a longer version on spell work, please leave a comment below and I can work on that. So in this case though, I don't want to say I am more than my job, because that is going towards something. I wanted to, this purpose of this effigy is to take on the hopelessness, so that the sluagh will come for this doll and not for me. So I'm even going to write on, I am going to write on here, I'm not going to write the whole thing, so I'm going to put the letter I and the letter A and then the letter N. And it kind of just looks like a scar again on the shoulder. But what it means is I am nothing. So that is the answer to that question. Now I only gave one answer. Like obviously there's more things that happen to us during the year. I only provided one example of those things. The only thing is I would definitely, if you're going to do this ritual, please limit yourself. Do not take more than 3 items of each question. I would, you know what, even letting yourself think of only one thing to put in this doll is probably the best thing to do, because you don't want to spend too much time dwelling on the past. Take those things that really cause you the most trouble, the most pain, and focus on that one element and not on several items and make yourself feel terrible. This doll is not about making yourself feel terrible. It's about accepting the hardships that you faced and taking that hopelessness, taking that drowning in that emotion and putting it into this doll so that you can sit with the sadness rather than drowning in it. So now you have your effigy ready to go. It's been loaded with all of your hopelessness. So now what's next? Well, you have to have an adventure now. You're going to go on a hunt. I would suggest that you find a forest preserve or a hiking trail that you love. And yes, you need to load up on the winter clothing if you live in the Midwest, as Bunny and I do. Keep yourself warm, but you're going on an outdoor adventure. You must be outdoors for this ritual. Also, you probably want to go a significant distance from your home. You don't have to do too crazy. You don't have to go to another state, but you definitely want to be somewhere that is removed from the area that you are normally in. So you are going to go to a place to go hiking. You are going to go to a place that is a nature preserve or somewhere. And you are going to go on a hunt. So once you find yourself deep into the forest, you are going to take your biodegradable effigy and you are going to leave it for the sluagh. You're going to you could even throw this into the forest if you wanted to. I would suggest that you leave it out, though. You can throw it away from yourself, but you don't want to bury this or burn this, because the idea is that you want the sluagh to find it and take it. And the idea is that a person might take this doll. Is this doll going to curse that person? No, it's not going to curse their person. They might take it and learn something from it. They might think it's the most interesting thing that they've ever found, and they might take it. It's not going to be tied to you because you are casting it away. You are specifically loading this effigy to be taken by the sluagh. So a person may actually come across this doll and take it home with them. That is perfectly fine because it will be given a brand new purpose. So that is fine. Another thing is that an animal might, especially if you are making this doll with corn husks, an animal might eat this. And that is fine. That is why I suggested that you use non-toxic products to create your symbols on here. If you're really nervous about the animals and what even a non-toxic substance might do to them, then you can use simply take a paintbrush that is loaded only with water and draw those sigils on with water only. So an animal eating this doll is another way for the sluagh to take this effigy. So leave it out. Let it go. So you're going to throw this into the forest, but your work is not done once that's been done. On the way back out, so you have to go pretty far in. So you're going to want to go into that forest, you're going to want to go into that nature center, you're going to want to go pretty deep in there because that's where you're going to leave the effigy, is far away. Before you throw the doll, you're going to ask yourself, what makes you so afraid to pursue what you find meaningful? What makes you afraid? And when you know what that is, and don't think too much on this, the idea is it's going to have to be the first thing that pops into your mind. So once you have that phrase, once you have that word, you're going to throw this doll with that word on your lips. What makes you afraid to pursue what you find meaningful? So you're going to let the doll go while shouting that word. Then, as you're walking out of the forest, then your next task is to ask, as you consider the regrets that you left behind in the effigy of this doll, as you consider the regrets that you've had this year, ask yourself, What do you wish would have happened? So what do you wish would have happened? So, and this, we're going to use another example. For example, with the attack that I had, what do I wish would have happened? Well, I wish I hadn't been attacked. I wish that this person and I could have been all right with each other in our own religions. And I wish that she had not felt so violated just from me being alive in her space, that she felt it necessary to completely destroy me simply because I did not share a religious belief with her. I wish that we could have been able to hold space with each other and been okay being different with each other. That's what I wish would have happened. So as you're walking out of the forest, really make it a meditative walk and think about what it is you wish would have happened. And finally, the last thing that I want you to consider as you are walking out of your forest preserve or your hiking trip is I want you to ask yourself what your greatest hope is for yourself. What are you seeking in 2020? And then, once you ask this question, what are you seeking? I want you to close your eyes before you ask this question, and when you open it, look around and find the first thing that catches your eye. That's going to be an omen. So this is what part of this ritual is. It's called an omens walk. You're looking for omens. So what is it that you see? Is it a bird in the tree? Do you see nothing but trees? It's just endless bark for miles? It is a rabbit. So write down what that image is, and then think about what that means. The idea here is think of this omen walk, think of this hiking trip like a dream, and write about it when you get home. And let your mind think about what this possibly could mean. You could even go, you could search the internet and consult dream symbology, and you could Google the tree that you saw. I saw a birch tree. What does that mean? You could Google birch trees and see what comes up and if that sparks anything in your imagination. And with that, if you do this ritual, please let me know in the comments below. I would really be interested to hear on what you found on your own wild hunt. And with that, have a fairyful day.